Now, the next speaker this morning, I'd like to welcome Geoff Ward, and he will be speaking about consumer participation and empowerment of illicit drug users. So this is very pertinent to be following on from Carla's talk. Geoff has been a member of the injecting drug using community for over 30 years. He's been involved in the Australian drug user movement for over 2 decades on both the local and a national level. Geoff is currently working as the Policy and Advocacy Officer for the Canberra Alliance for Harm Minimisation and Advocacy. This is the ACT's peer-based drug user group. Geoff is passionate about empowering people who inject drugs with the knowledge of their consumer rights, with a specific focus on improving their involvement in and the nature of drug substitution and pharmacotherapy problems. Freudian slip, perhaps. Geoff, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Geoff Ward. Firstly, I would like to thank the organisers for the opportunity to present a keynote address. And I've thought and rethought about how to tackle speaking about the issue of consumer participation and empowerment in a way that frames the issue, gives a little bit of history, and hopefully offers some ideas for doing things better. And I apologise for those who like PowerPoint slides, but I haven't got any except 2. Now, the best information that I found really comes from the 2008 Treatment Service Users Project final report, which was undertaken by the Australian Injecting and Illicit Drug Users League, or ABLE, and I think they defined the problem with some clarity. And the preface to the final report actually begins with a quote which came from a 1994 Commonwealth Department of Health and Human Services and Health report called Better Health Outcomes for Australians. And the quote went, "Involving the community in decision-making about their own health, as well as the planning and management of health services, is integral to effective health promotion and illness prevention." For some time, health bureaucracies and services in Australia and globally have acknowledged the value of consumer representation and input into the planning, operation and evaluation of services. Governments around Australia have put on the record that they now recognise consumer participation as an integral component of quality healthcare. Unfortunately, many drug treatment service agencies continue to fail to capitalise on the developments in involving communities and consumers in the planning and delivery of services. And the groundbreaking report that I just mentioned involved the National Centre for HIV Social Research and ABLE as the peak organisation representing drug users and drug user groups around the country. And I would argue that without doubt, the findings and recommendations of this study represent a significant contribution to the development of improved strategies for consumer involvement with alcohol and other drug service providers. And it is undeniable that people who use drugs illicitly do experience widespread discrimination within the health system. This reduces the effectiveness of treatment services and acts as a substantial barrier. My experience in working with peer-based drug use organisations has shown me that if drug treatment services do involve consumers in service planning and delivery, as well as seeing these consumers as legitimate participants in their own healthcare, then it is a certainty that there will be marked improvements in the efficacy of treatment and better outcomes for all. On an autobiographical note, I began injecting myself some 37 years ago. Needless to say, I've had numerous interactions with the drug and alcohol sector in various guises and for a variety of reasons. I've been on a methadone maintenance program for coming on 25 years. Now, during those years, I did a politics degree at Monash Uni, Certificate 4 in Alcohol and Other Drugs, and various other courses like a TAFE mediator course, etc. And at one time, I actually held down 2 full-time jobs to pay for my drug of choice. I will add that I would, of course, have preferred to have had access to diacetylmorphine, also known as heroin, as my drug of choice, but as I will outline later, I would say that this remains a forlorn hope. I consider drug use, even so-called dependent use, to be no more a disease or a psychiatric problem than homosexuality is. Similarly, It is nonsensical to describe the cessation of the use of substances arbitrarily defined as drugs as a cure. It is merely the cessation of a behaviour that society has deemed to be socially unacceptable. The way in which drugs are classified and distinguished from medicines has little relation to their innate properties or usefulness, but is rather an exercise in socio-cultural and sometimes theological politics. The dominant public discourse around illicit drug use is a pathologising one, and one that is directly counterposed to and dismissive of the construction of drug use as an act of pleasure-seeking. To focus on whether people are taking drugs, to my mind, is to miss the point. What really matters is the quality of their lives and their contributions to society. Everyone's life has been affected or impacted by the way drugs and their usage has been socially constructed. There is a continuum from totally dysfunctional, problematic drug user to functional, recreational drug user. Sadly, the media only ever cover the former, with pejorative terms like junkie, addict, or worse. And that image is usually grossly exaggerated and no pretense of objectivity is made. And it's worth reminding ourselves that there are just 3 international treaties that comprise the global regime of drug prohibition that criminalises the possession of certain drugs and non-medical drug use. An almost global failure to address the risks associated with drug use has led to a human rights crisis amongst people who use illegal drugs that fuels our vulnerability to abuse, discrimination, incarceration, blood-borne viruses, and even death. The so-called war on drugs has been, in practice, a war on people who use drugs and their communities. Harsh national and international drug laws and repressive policies are widely implemented in a fashion that makes the violation of drug users' human rights systemic and inevitable. This repression of people who use, and specifically people who inject drugs, doesn't just lead to rights violations, but in the context of HIV/AIDS and hepatitis C, it is lethal, as it drives people who use drugs away from appropriate prevention services and programs where they are provided, as well as from treatment and care services. I would argue that ending the construct of drug use as a criminal/legal issue and placing it within a health paradigm is one of the great human rights issues of our time. For now, the damaging effects of stigma and discrimination just get factored in as extra things that we just have to deal with and adjust to. And it is a real catch-22 situation. You want to be treated as capable, but by virtue of being on, say, methadone, you're under suspicion, and certainly aware of being honest, especially about things, as Carla mentioned before, the person who wanted to admit using occasionally. The ramifications can be very severe, especially if you are dealing with child protection services or have an unsympathetic employer who finds out that you're on pharmacotherapy, or you want to keep your takeaways or be able to travel. For me, the reality of signing up for methadone has been a trade-off. You've got on one hand the reassurance that a dose of methadone is available daily, balanced against the constraints of a regimented and controlling program. You are agreeing to be constrained and controlled in ways that no other consumer of a health treatment program will ever be subjected to. And I think it is not exaggerating to say that pharmacotherapy is designed very much with social control in mind, that deviant drug users must be kept under close supervision and surveillance. My personal experience has been firstly one of gratitude that there is access to opioid maintenance treatment in Australia, and certainly meeting Russian colleagues in Vilnius recently at the International Harm Reduction Conference was a real eye-opener to have a country where has such low regard for their drug users that there aren't needle exchanges and there's certainly no pharmacotherapy, and the impact that that's had on people in Russia was just quite staggering. So I have access in Australia, but also frustration at the extent of the system's obsession with preventing diversion and its inability to treat you as an individual. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand my experience of the drug and alcohol area is extensive, and it spans the pre-HIV years, the HIV years, and now the hepatitis C and the new recovery era. Only one of these periods gave people who inject drugs a sense of hope. A period of absolutely no consumer input existed in the pre-AIDS era as a result of zero contact with people who injected, and consequently there was nothing being offered by alcohol and other drug agencies, and certainly no services that we wanted. The only gig in town was the abstinence-based therapeutic communities who taught you how to mow grass with nail scissors. Most people only went there if judges or child services demanded it of them. There was no input by consumers into how those services were delivered. In fact, a packed suitcase was like the likely response to any suggestion of change made by somebody actually there, a consumer. This is the period when the myth of the, quote, hard-to-reach junkie emerged. We weren't hard to reach, you just had nothing that we wanted. On the plus side, the quality of the heroin was sublime, and to use back then was to be part of a fun, vibrant subculture, and I think we need to remember that aspect, and I certainly do. Obtaining and injecting equipment, however, was an art in itself, and I became very familiar with a certain surgical supplier, T. Roper and Sons, and my glass fit was lovingly boiled after each use, and aesthetically it was a joy to use. The arrival of HIV/AIDS, while devastating, provided injecting drug users with a lifeline, well, those of us who did not die of HIV. The needle and syringe program, or NSP in particular, was introduced, but let's be clear about why. It was not as a result of compassion and concern for injecting drug users. It was really to protect the wider community from a so-called third wave of infection. The scenario was one of injecting drug users sleeping with your sons and daughters and infecting them. The Australian health policy response to HIV/AIDS has been characterised as emerging from the grassroots rather than top-down, and as involving a high degree of partnership between government and non-government stakeholders. Without doubt, an enormous amount of credit is due to the then Federal Health Minister, Dr. Neil Blewett. His focus was on prevention at a time when a positive diagnosis was a death sentence. In 1985, he told the National Conference on HIV/AIDS that the government was opposed to any intemperate legislative action that discriminates against at-risk groups or those suffering from the disease. And Dr. Blewett also steered effective cooperative partnership between all levels of government, community groups, health professionals, researchers, and people living with HIV/AIDS. And that helped to develop a community-based model that attracted non-partisan political consensus and support. And Australia still gets rightly international kudos for that success. And of course, the reality of the political situation at the time of the advent of HIV/AIDS was we had Prime Minister Bob Hawke, who famously shed tears at a press conference in 1984 when he revealed that his own daughter, Rosalind, had a heroin problem. In a 2010 update of his biography, Bob acknowledged that he suffered a great period of depression in 1984 after that issue came to light. Suffice to say that we had a Prime Minister who was not going to veto the policy work of his Health Minister. The emergence of a national approach to drug policy and the recognition of the role of opioid pharmacotherapy treatment could play in reducing the risk of HIV/AIDS infection changed the methadone landscape. Methadone clinics opened up. Before HIV, accessing methadone maintenance was like trying to pull teeth. At best, you could perhaps get on a 28-day program where you reduced a meal a day, but in terms of ongoing maintenance, it was very, very difficult. However, with the advent of HIV/AIDS, there was a significant change in the way in which the print media viewed drugs. Instead of just highlighting the issues around drugs, the media significantly shifted the emphasis, calling for solutions. Methadone might not cure addiction, but it was seen as fulfilling the social objectives of limiting the need for junkies to hit little old ladies over the head for their purses. Added to this was the national policy environment that emphasised methadone treatment in the changing ideological environment of harm minimisation. The blossoming of methadone programs that were far more attractive to users, to my mind, is a classic example of the way that problems can be reconceptualised over time, and so too can possible solutions. And it is worth mentioning that just this past March, Juan Mendez, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, found that the denial of methadone to opiate-dependent people is in and of itself, quote, ill treatment and possibly torture. As a result of the need to provide services that drug users would visit, the services had to be acceptable. And this is the period when consumer activism in the drug user movement found its feet, if only for a brief time. However, it's worth remembering that many of the innovations that we managed to get are incredibly important and lasting, such as access to pharmacotherapy and the needle and syringe exchange program. Now, I'm from the ACT, and I just want to give you a little sense of history and what I consider to be a very, very important moment in the history of, well, drug policy in this country. After a select committee inquiry into illicit drugs, HIV and prostitution in 1989 in the ACT, a trial of prescription heroin was proposed. An enormous amount of drug user organisation and consumer input not to mention 6 years of careful scientific research, went into this proposal. And I can't help but recall the sense of unbridled optimism and hope that increased as each hurdle seemed to be cleared. At a previous APSAD in 2011, I was riveted by the keynote address of Professor Gabrielle Bammer, and her talk was entitled, "How Investigating the Feasibility of Heroin Prescription Produced a New Discipline." And she recounted her experiences of doing feasibility research into a heroin trial and the gaining of support of the Ministerial Council on Drug Strategy. Sadly, a mere 18 days later, on the 19th of August 1997, it was vetoed by then Prime Minister John Howard, and Federal Cabinet just went along with his unilateral decision. And I recall Gabrielle saying that she looked in the index of John Howard's biography, published after his political demise, to find heroin trial, and she could find no reference whatsoever, and she was quite staggered by that fact. And Gabrielle spoke of her naivety and her realisation that researchers cannot control the policy-making process, let alone the outcomes. Since the moment of John Howard's veto, Australia has been treading water in the development of innovations in harm reduction. We have held on to, more or less, what we had at the time, but there have been no national developments of any consequence. Today, we are in a moribund, neoliberally, ideologically straitjacketed do-nothing era. We have political leaders who are not even willing to have a debate about the failed prohibition paradigm, as evidenced by the way that the Australia 21 reports were completely ignored by the then Gillard government. Now, my work at the Canberra Alliance for Harm Minimisation and Advocacy, or CARMA, as a policy and advocacy officer, has allowed me to see firsthand the benefits of having consumers participate in good faith in the development of policies and protocols in the ACT opioid maintenance treatment or pharmacotherapy program. Now, as everyone knows, the Australian Capital Territory, or ACT, is a small jurisdiction with the City of Canberra at its heart. Currently, in our 17-member Legislative Assembly, there are 7 Labor, 7 Liberal and 1 Greens member. The Greens member effectively got to decide who governed, and Shane Rattenbury's vote kept the existing Labor government in power. I would argue that the ACT government is as progressive as currently exists in Australia, and I offer as some proof the funding by the ACT government and the Chief Minister, Katie Gallagher, of the CARMA peer-based naloxone program, which I hope everyone has heard about to some extent at least. The ACT government funded CARMA to train 200 current opiate users in overdose recognition and response, and if assessed as having grasped the information by a doctor, they then receive a kit with 5 doses of naloxone and a small payment for having completed the training. I would put forward the CARMA naloxone program as a long overdue but nonetheless very worthwhile example of the type of public policy success that can be implemented with just a little political courage. The early research that I've glimpsed supports this view. The coverage by the ABC Lateline program was balanced and intelligent. However, I must point out that many people were very perplexed watching that program by the comments of Alex Wodak that appeared to be somewhat dismissive of CARMA's naloxone program. And a lot of people actually wondered whether he'd been taken out of context. We all know that TV programs are edited for time, and maybe he was sort of misquoted. But I think his piece in the Conversation website on November the 15th, entitled "Should Naloxone be Used to Reduce Opioid Overdoses?" makes clear that Alex really does not approve, as, quote, "existing evidence for effectiveness and safety is weak." They're his words. I have to disagree. There is plenty of evidence. It is just a different kind than randomised controlled trials. And I do find his application of the hierarchy of research legitimacy in this instance to be a little questionable. Who amongst my peers would Alex propose giving a placebo in lieu of naloxone to satisfy these research standards? The current costs of opioid pharmacotherapy programs around Australia, in particular the problems associated with high dosing costs, has been an issue of concern for some time. And Dr. James Rowe's research, entitled "A Raw Deal, The Impact on Health of Consumers Relative to the Cost of Pharmacotherapy," certainly highlighted the problems of dispensing fees in Victoria. The key findings were that dispensing fees created the biggest obstacle when entering and also remaining in pharmacotherapy, especially for consumers on low incomes. The PBS discriminates against pharmacotherapy consumers by not subsidising methadone or buprenorphine. And this whole area, I feel, of cost is one mired in some myth Opioid pharmacotherapies, that is to say methadone syrup, the brown, Biodone, the pink, Subutex, straight buprenorphine, and Suboxone, buprenorphine plus naloxone, are provided free by the federal government. They fall under Section 100 of the National Health Act of 1953 and are available under the Opiate Dependence Treatment Program free of charge. However, private clinics and community pharmacies have the right to set their own charges, and in fact there is no maximum price regulation. These fees are explained as dispensing fees or consumer co-payments, but reports of consumers being charged even $70, $80, $90 per week are sadly commonplace, especially if you're in a remote area where there's only one pharmacy. And cost is a critical factor in the uptake and retention rates. Of course, there are jurisdictions with public dosing programs, but these are far less likely to facilitate access to takeaway doses and far more inclined to be wedded to heavy urine drug testing regimes. No other treatment has such differing and variant cost structures, and I would suggest there would actually be a huge outcry were they're supplied to heart or diabetes medications. Now, over the years, I've come across researchers in this field who, in fact, don't know that opioid maintenance treatment consumers are paying a daily dosing charge, but it's free, many have said, or at most it's just a one-off $5.90 charge or $5.70 charge for a healthcare card holder for the life of the prescription. In fact, there is a daily dosing charge that is utterly unregulated, as I just said, and there's not even a maximum fee set. Just think for a moment about something in your life that you simply could not do without. For instance, diabetic medication, Ventolin for asthma, or the pill, for example, and then think about having to pay up to a quarter of your income just to get access to it. I actually think Choice should take it up as a consumer issue, but I haven't seen it in their magazine, unfortunately. Other rules apply to opioid maintenance treatment consumers that no other consumers of prescription medicine are subjected to. For example, many pharmacists have a rule that no one on opioid maintenance treatment can dose between noon and 2 p.m, or some other similar definition of the lunchtime rush, when in fact for many consumers who do work, this can be the most suitable time to pick up. Despite the protestations of many a community pharmacist, there is an undeniable power imbalance between an opioid maintenance treatment consumer and their pharmacist. The consumer is at risk of having a question asked being perceived as being a troublemaker or being disruptive, and this fear of possible consequences inhibits the development of an honest relationship between consumers and their pharmacist. There are many examples of consumers being sent back to the hospital for being, quote, troublemakers, which really was just asking questions or trying to assert their rights. And of course, one of the really egregious regional anomalies is waiting times to even get on a pharmacotherapy program, for example. There was a story in the ABC earlier this year about waiting lists of up to 2 years in the Hunter region. Try telling someone desperate to get onto methadone, sorry mate, can't help you now, try back in a couple of years. It just doesn't work. All right, I'm using opioid pharmacotherapy as an example of a service constructed to benefit opioid users, especially illicit heroin injectors. And as I've already stated, the only legal option that people currently have for getting their act together is opioid maintenance treatment. So, if the system is going to talk the talk, how about walking the walk? Opioid maintenance treatment is promoted as a way back to being proper citizens. However, it is lacking in flexibility to accommodate very real issues, such as the need for some people to keep it hidden from their employers or perhaps even their family. And there are so many potential impediments: the ad hoc nature of urine drug testing, the constraints on travel. There are difficulties for people in attending family get-togethers. If you cannot get enough takeaways to cover the holidays, then you have to organise a transfer. To pull that off, you have to either lie or make up a plausible excuse as to why you have to get to the chemist every day for people whose family don't know they're on the program. If a transfer cannot be organised or is just not possible, then the family get-together just does not happen and the person is seen as not being bothered to come, or same old, whoever the person is, drugs are more important than the family. A classic and very recent example that I can speak to is a woman in Canberra who has been a very stable methadone consumer for many years, accessing 4 takeaways at a private pharmacy, but who gets her script renewals from doctors at the public clinic. Her wedding was upcoming and plans had been made for her honeymoon travel. Then she goes to dose at a community pharmacist, and the pharmacist very sadly says that your doctor has cancelled all your takeaways due to a suspicious urine drug test. So the first inkling she has of any problem is when she gets told by her pharmacist that all her takeaways have been cancelled. Just consider for a moment the absolute and utter despair that she must have felt on the sudden realisation that her honeymoon plans were shot. No discussion with the doctor, no real reason, nothing. A few days on, utterly distressed, she was recounting her situation to someone in the queue at her pharmacy waiting to get dosed. Very fortuitously, another woman who was also waiting to dose overheard her conversation, which, due to the absence of any privacy in the dosing area, but that is another issue, but on hearing her situation, she made the effort to ask if she knew about the existence of karma. Now, this very fortuitously resulted in this person contacting karma, and we were alerted to this case, and we were able to advocate on her behalf. And as it transpired, the woman had actually dosed in person at her pharmacy on the 2 days before and on the very day of the urine test that had come up, no methadone detected. Had the doctor rung the pharmacist before cancelling all her takeaways, it would have been obvious that this test was faulty or erroneous. What an unnecessary trauma for this woman to have to suffer for such a silly reason. And unfortunately, stories like this are all too common. Sadly, the all too common instant reaction to any anomalous urine test result is cancel all takeaways. There's just an immediate assumption of fault on the part of the consumer. Now, to my mind, this is a real lowest common denominator approach. I think there needs to be a far more intelligent approach taken where consumers are actually considered as individuals. Personal circumstances surely must be taken into account. This is the only legal option you have if opiate use has become problematic, is to get on an opioid substitution or maintenance program. In good faith, people take up this option only to find inane obstacles put in their way. And a classic example is transferring from another jurisdiction. This customarily entails with starting back at square one with loss of takeaways, irrespective of the length of time that you've already been on the program or what information the transferring doctor provides to the new doctor or clinic. There's just no continuity of care. In my own personal case, when I transferred up to Canberra from Melbourne in 2003, I had to do my time catching a bus out to the Rowallan Clinic at the Canberra Hospital daily for a couple of months before I proved myself and could transfer to a community pharmacy and regain my access to my regular 4 takeaways. Going on opioid maintenance treatment is meant to facilitate a return to normality. Access to takeaways is meant to help people with employment. But fear of the authorities about diversion precludes you from, say, getting Fiseptone instead of the Biodone or the brown syrup. In my own case, as I pointed out, have been a stable consumer for well over 2 decades now. The last time I visited my GP, who I have great confidence in and a good relationship, I asked him what were the chances of perhaps transferring from Biodone to Fiseptone. It's much easier, you can split dose, it gives you more control. He had absolutely no issue with my request and could see the logic of my inquiry. You can titrate your dose, split dose, no hassles with diluted liquids, etc. However, he said, I have to be quite blunt, no can do. The authorities are just too obsessed with diversion. So that was the end of that one. At a recent AGM of AVIL, the peak national organisation, a participant representing Tasmania had to suffer the anxiety of trying to organise a dose at the ACT public dosing clinic at the hospital, as the rules in Tasmania prevented him from accessing 2 takeaways in a row. What are we actually achieving by imposing such restrictive rules? Another very concerning matter which I'd like to just quickly discuss is in late October of this year, a Victorian coroner, Jacinta Heffy, quite savagely attacked the Victorian Health Department of the administration of the methadone program in Victoria. Hysterical coverage by the media focused on the death of a 16-year-old Bendigo girl and the coroner's attribution of 21 deaths to methadone takeaways with, quote, questions over another 42 deaths. Her recommendation was a massive restriction, if not an ending of access to takeaways. That was her recommendation. Now, one of the problems is there's no analysis of the role of other drugs, especially benzodiazepines, in actually causing fatal overdoses. Every time that methadone comes up in an autopsy report, it seems to me the sole responsibility is ascribed to methadone. We must be really careful not to obliterate the proven benefits of access to takeaways as a result of the possibility that they can get into the hands of people to whom they were not prescribed. I'm sure I do not need to spell out to this audience that the evidence supporting methadone as the gold standard is well accepted. Such an unbalanced response will do enormous harm and adversely affect people who are taking the option that society offers them. Every single health intervention has a cost. Is it really reasonable to compromise our health and well-being in a vain attempt to eradicate all risk? And in response, our sister organisation, Harm Reduction Victoria, put out a media release on November the 1st, and the Executive Officer, Jenny Kelsall, put the issue thus. Methadone, or opioid replacement therapy, was put on trial by the coroner and found guilty. The girl's death is a tragic story. Mostly, it's a story of her extreme vulnerability and her carers' inability to protect her. But the coroner judged the provision of takeaway doses of methadone particularly harshly. Methadone's been the mainstay of treatment for opioid dependency since the late 80s and early 90s, and there is a wealth of evidence to support its effectiveness and its safety. Once a client is stabilised, methadone actually has a protective effect and significantly reduces the risk of opioid-related overdose. Methadone is not the bad guy of the story, and neither are the takeaway doses, which are an integral part of the methadone treatment program. Methadone saves lives and enhances clients' well-being and quality of life. It was not methadone alone which led to her untimely death. The lethal cocktail was a combination of methadone and alprazolam, or Xanax, as is often the case, said Jenny Kelsall. In our overdose prevention and education workshops for people who use drugs, we emphasise that it is usually a combination of drugs, and in particular central nervous system depressants, which lead to overdose, just as it is usually the result of a number of contributing factors. However, the coroner makes little of these Xanax tablets despite the fact that their source could not be identified. Rather than a review of policies which inform takeaway doses, Harm Reduction Victoria believes that it would be far more appropriate to have a peer-driven and targeted methadone consumer safety campaign to remind methadone clients of methadone's potency and its potential for overdose, particularly in conjunction with other central nervous system depressants, and also in the hands of methadone-naive individuals, Ms Kelsall continued. Harm Reduction Victoria proposed that the methadone consumer education campaign would have to include the prescribing of naloxone in conjunction with methadone for all methadone clients in order to reduce the number of fatal overdoses. If naloxone had been made available to the others present prior to her death, she may well be still alive today. But being an illicit drug user means being vulnerable to stigma and discrimination. And the national organisation ABLE has undertaken quite an extensive stigma and discrimination survey. And I've read some of the responses that have come in, and they're really quite disturbing. And I'll just give you one example, and this is a quote. I had gone to St Vincent's after hurting my back in a work-related accident. After x-rays and examination, the doctor wrote a prescription for morphine tablets and was giving me some friendly advice. After turning a page in my hospital file and seeing that I'd been a methadone patient at Rankin Court 4 years earlier, she tore up the script in front of me and told me to go home and take a hot bath. To which I replied, I can't move my back to actually get into a bath. When I questioned her reasoning, I was told to leave immediately or security would remove me or the police would be called. And there are literally numerous examples in the discrimination survey of similar egregious treatment where people, I think, just get treated shamefully. I would argue another major problem is the lack of or difficulty in establishing long-term relationships with prescribing doctors who has a long-term understanding of you as an individual. Methadone or buprenorphine, as I've said, are the only legal options on offer, and surely there should be a level of support given for having a go. Being able to be honest with your GP is surely the best arrangement possible. There are also issues of lack of respect for privacy. Just one example, I was doing outreach at a service, and a staff member came up to say hello to us as Karma workers, and then proceeded to portray all sorts of confidential information of clients who were coming into dose, discussing personal health, legal and other issues in front of me. And I was actually mortified and actually a bit shocked as these people's personal information was raised in front of me. But it just didn't seem to be a problem to the person actually breaching the confidentiality. All right, I've tried to give some insights into the reality of being a consumer of opioid pharmacotherapy in an environment where the war on drugs just rolls on. The stigma and discrimination, the lowest common denominator paradigm, the arbitrary rules, the degradation of supervised urine tests and so on. I'd now like to finish with some positive stories and improved outcomes that I can personally speak to, which transpire as a result of genuine consumer participation, as I've seen take place in the ACT. The ACT Opioid Treatment Advisory Committee, or OTAC, has all the stakeholders involved in the provision of methadone and buprenorphine, but what sets it apart is the inclusion of 5 members from a consumer perspective. There are 3 CARMA staff, of which I'm one, and 2 consumer representatives elected from a consumer organisation called FAT, the Pharmacotherapy Advocacy and Action Team. Now, in this terms of reference of this consumer group, under the heading Role and Purpose, is the following. FAT is an unfunded group that was started by CARMA and continues to be supported by CARMA, which exists to advocate for all consumers of methadone and buprenorphine, whether on the public program at the Canberra Hospital or the community program, local pharmacies. It also advocates for other drug users for whom pharmacotherapies could be available. FAT aims to improve the range, choice and quality of pharmacotherapy services available, ensure that consumers are treated with dignity and respect and in a timely manner, offer a mechanism for consumer input into relevant committees, for example, the OTAC, Opioid Treatment Advisory Committee, advocate on behalf of consumers experiencing problems or difficulties accessing or continuing to receive pharmacotherapy treatment, have a role in the training of community pharmacists, needle and syringe program workers and other relevant allied health professionals who are involved in opioid replacement treatments. And finally, the last 2, expand the number of treatment places available for methadone and buprenorphine and advocate for the introduction of new treatments, for example, heroin, injectable methadone, phiseptone, fentanyl, etc. And since then, they've also extended to include looking at possibilities for amphetamine-type substances, of which there isn't any sort of similar pharmacotherapy offered for people who are ice or speed users. Membership of FAT, this consumers group, is open to anyone on an opioid replacement program or who agrees with FAT's terms of reference and philosophy. For many people on opioid maintenance treatment, the fact that in Canberra there is a pharmacotherapy advocacy and action team or a consumers group comes as a bit of a shock. The fact that a consumer who wants to get involved can also be a member of the committee that actually oversees the program positively blows their mind. This is indicative of the low expectations that so many consumers have. Now, a single consumer representative would, of course, I would say, be viewed as tokenistic, and an individual could easily be overwhelmed and marginalised. But on our committee in the ACT, there are 5 members who are essentially looking after the interests of consumers. And even more important is the way that the involvement of these consumers is regarded by the powers that be. The ACT Opioid Maintenance Treatment Guidelines preface states, and I quote, "The broad goal of treatment for opioid dependence is to improve the health outcomes and to promote wellness. Treatment for opioid dependence is guided by the principles of harm minimisation. ACT Health recognises that consumer participation improves service quality, safety and health outcomes and assists in making services more responsive to the needs of consumers." It also states that the guidelines, quote, "have been produced by ACT Health in collaboration with the ACT Division of General Practice, the Pharmacy Guild of Australia, ACT branch and the Canberra Alliance for Harm Minimisation and Advocacy. These partners are integral to the care provided to clients requiring opioid maintenance treatment in the ACT." And I think that puts the ACT program way ahead of other jurisdictions, that's not only does it recognise the importance of having it, but they actually make the effort to have 5 consumer voices on the committee and remunerate the 2 representatives from the FAT group. Real improvements have followed. This is not just pie in the sky. After a concerted effort by consumers, the doctors at our public dosing clinic acknowledged that their traditional long-held commitment to mandatory monthly supervised urine tests was actually really not any longer necessary. CARMA had in the past done a paper about the enormous cost of this extensive urine testing regime and the way that consumers actually felt degraded when being watched while taking a piss, and not always by a member of the same gender. Think about that. Thanks to the advocacy of CARMA and FAT, the cost in the ACT has remained stable for our consumers at $15 a week for many years and will most likely stay at that rate for the foreseeable future, despite the now meek protestations of some members, including the Pharmacy Guild rep. He sort of makes a little point of it. Will it ever go up again? No, not for a while. Anyway, to conclude, there are enormous concerns also, I would say, about this brand new feature of electronic records. States like Western Australia, I've only just recently learned the extent to which their drug register is something from which you can't escape. To me, this is almost reminiscent of Nazi Germany and marks to identify people, the groups of people who are deemed unsavoury. Why do we think it's all right to have names permanently included in a drug registry? The vast bulk of the health and human rights problems that people who use drugs face, I would argue, are driven by the prohibitionist system. They are not accidents or occasional abuses, but are systemically driven by prohibition. A system which makes it impossible to ascertain the quality of drugs you are taking or what contaminants they've been cut with. A system which gifts a multi-billion-dollar global industry to organised crime. And the last thing on their mind is the health or rights of the people who consume their products. And all that has happened is the creation of failed narco-states, massive corruption and violence, and a total undermining of confidence in government health education, such as the tough on drugs messages that the Howard government was so famous for. Drug users are only visible when they encounter problems in their drug use. These problems more often than not are created by the repression of prohibition rather than the drugs themselves. And those who are outed as illicit drug users find themselves victims of systemic stigma and discrimination that can range from being denied employment, housing, education, and access to appropriate healthcare. To quote an early document of Input, the international network of people who use drugs, who I'm happy to say have actually secured some funding to ensure their future, quote, "The spread of HIV, hepatitis C, and the incarceration of hundreds of thousands of people are all a direct result of completely misguided policies driven by dogma. Input calls for an end to the war on our people and for a new period of peace and intelligent, open debate." And that's probably not a bad place to end. Just in conclusion, I personally have seen the real benefits of taking consumer participation seriously in this area. People may take some time to respond because it's amazing how downcast and downtrodden a lot of people on pharmacotherapy are. And look, one of the things that broke my heart was somebody who said they felt they were treated really well because the dosing staff every morning said hello. I mean, that's a pretty low threshold, sort of feeling good about the service. So, look, I'll leave it at that. And thank you again to APSAD for the opportunity to speak. I hope I've raised some issues of interest, and thank you.